Welcome along to Extra Time here on LCFC Radio and LCFC TV with me, Dan Bates, Iwan Roberts, Tony Cottee and Jerry Taggart join me today to look back at that eventful game at Selhurst Park on Sunday. We'll have a bit of a look at the start of the season in general, and of course these guys will go head-to-head in the football Jenga at the end of the show as well. How are you all? Have you all had a good weekend? Obviously, Tony, you've been working. Jerry, you've been off on a bit of a jolly as well.
Yeah, every now and again we all need a little bit of a break, don't we? So this trip was has been put off for a couple of years, and so yeah, it was good to get away with a group of lads playing a bit of golf in the sunshine. So yeah, very good. Glad to be back though. Always glad to get home.
Very nice. How was the game that you were at this weekend, Iwan?
Boring 0-0 draw, Dan. I weren't too far from the King Power, to be fair. I was at Pride Park. And to be fair, you look at Derby's situation and bottom of the Championship, but had they not lost that 12 point to when they've gone into administration, I think they'd be something like 8th or 9th, 3 points off the playoffs. And to be fair, he's got them playing as Wayne Rooney. He has got them playing, and they're a young group. I think they've got a great chance of getting out of trouble. I really do.
And Tony, you were obviously at the West Ham game as well yesterday, simultaneous to that Leicester one.
Yeah, I was, Dan. Yeah, I mean, I had a nice afternoon off on Saturday. Didn't sort of do too much, but then yesterday I went to West Ham Brentford. I was just saying to you guys, as good as West Ham have been this year, I was really, really impressed with Brentford. I know we'll probably talk about the Premier League games a little bit later on, but they look a well-organised side. And at the moment, as things stand, you've got to say Brentford are going to stay in the Premier League. They played really well yesterday.
Ewan, obviously you worked with us, didn't you, on Match Day Live yesterday?
Yeah.
That game with Crystal Palace, and as I said in the intro, it was a pretty eventful game, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, we were all excited when the team news came out an hour before kick-off, and we saw the four boys up front, Iheanacho partnering Jamie Vardy, Barnes on the left, Iheanacho on the right. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they got enough of the ball to show what they're capable of. Obviously, Vardy and Iheanacho, 2 great goals in that first half. But I just thought they were starved of service. I really did. Looking back at the game, I think it's a good point. I think when you look at the statistics, and I thought Palace had the better possession. I thought they were the better side. I mean, they had 18 shots at Kasper's goal, not all on target, obviously. But when you allow someone to have that many efforts on your goal, something is going to crack. And in that second half, you can't really argue that they didn't deserve the point that they got. And when they scored that second equaliser on 71 minutes, I was fearing the worst, Dan, to be fair, because if there was one team going to go on to win that game, it was going to be Crystal Palace, sadly.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be the first time we do today, Jerry, but I'm going to make a comparison to that Napoli game. Obviously, a few weeks ago at King Power Stadium, both finished 2-2 when Leicester were 2-0 up. But weirdly, at full time, there was a kind of a mix of emotions as well. Obviously, I think the overriding one was the disappointment of losing the 2-0 lead. But at the same time, as Ewan's rightly said there, Palace could easily have won the game as well.
Yeah, I think that's the way things are going at the minute. And it was, it's interesting. I always like listening to managers' post-match interviews, and Brendan was bluntly clear and honest about it, and saying that, they took the lead against the run of play. And from the highlights that I've seen, don't get me wrong, Leicester set up that way to try and hit them on the counter-attack whenever they could. And they both of them goals he scored in the first half, all better against the run of play. We're training ground sessions that the manager would have set up, and they worked brilliantly. And the goals that they took were textbook goals from Kelechi. Putting pressure on. That's what Brendan wants, that high press. And obviously Harvey Barnes, winning that duel in the middle of the field, having that ball, and Jamie making that trademark run. And when he was through on goal, he wasn't missing that. So frustration. But as we said, as the game went on, Palace are a good side. There's a lot there's a lot of teams this season that will not struggle, and Palace are one of those teams where invariably in seasons gone by they've had a bit of a struggle just to stay in the league. And now you've got the likes of West Ham who have improved. Brentford have come in the league, look like they're a decent team, by the way. And Palace are another team that look like a decent team. We're going to cause some issues for a lot of teams. So I'd have to agree with you. I think when you look at the bigger picture, a draw wasn't a bad result. Whether or not they take a 2-goal lead, you always knew that Palace were always in that game. And it was only a matter of time before, like we said against Napoli, you could see them get clawing their way back. You could see that they were going to score goals, they were creating chances, to hit the bar and what have you. So you've got to say it was a fair result, really.
Yeah, Leicester themselves have never had a great record either at Selhurst Park. And you have to give credit, Tony, as Jerry rightly has done and as Iwan has as well, to Crystal Palace and to the job that Patrick Vieira has done already in his time there.
Yeah, I admire him for taking over the job in the first place, Dan, because you looked at that squad under Roy Hodgson, a very ageing squad. There was a lot of players out of contract. And if ever you get to the end of a season and you've got 9 or 10 players out of contract that are going to leave, particularly senior players, you think to yourself, I'm not sure. I, for one, I thought it was going to be a real season of struggle for Palace. It might still be, I don't know, but you can only look at the initial first 7 games, and I agree with what the boy said. It was a well-organised Palace team, a lot of youth in there, a lot of athleticism, good players as well. It's a nice mixture that Vieira's got. And in the manager, you've got an iconic Premier League player that the players are going to look up to. And, I think every player, eventually you suss out your manager. You work out whether they're good at managing or they're not good at managing. At the moment, everything's a bit of a downhill thing for Palace, isn't it? And everything's going well for them because, you've got that manager they all look up to and they're performing well. And it's a tough place to go. The fans are quite hostile. And, when it's a packed Selhurst Park, it's not one of those games that you look at and think, oh, yeah, it's an easy 3 points. And particularly with how Leicester are at the moment, with all the injuries, we all know about that. It makes a massive difference. You're going to a team that's flying at the start of the season with a new manager, and you're struggling without some of your best defenders. It's always going to be tough. On a positive, Leicester scored the 2 goals. And then, of course, the negative, Dan, was to concede those 2 goals and only get a point. But on reflection, I think it was a good point. It was certainly a point gained as opposed to 2 lost.
When you saw it at full time as well, and I know you'll have obviously seen the pictures, when Brendan Rodgers and the players, they went over to the away end. The away end was all still packed and they were all on their feet clapping, which I think probably gave a bit of an indication to those that were there, realised that it was a hard-earned point in the end. And yes, we kind of have to caveat every time we say that Leicester were 2-0 up and you expect a team being 2-0 up to win the game. But actually, it was a good point, and you could see that reflected from the reaction of the fans and the players.
Dan, fans aren't stupid. They can see when a team's giving it everything. There was no lack of effort. And the fans know it's not quite happening for the team at the minute. As TC's just alluded to, now once again, Leicester have been hampered with injuries to key players, which is hurting them at the minute. And Brendan won't make any excuses. He'll just get on with it. But Leicester fans aren't daft. They can see that there's no lack of effort. Things aren't quite going for them at the minute. Yesterday, the start of the season, which I'm sure we'll talk about, as you said. And that's why fans they'll stick with players who are giving it everything, giving it their all. It's when they're not giving the team 100%, when they're not putting in that work rate, when they're not closing down, when they're not putting tackles in, when they're not putting their bodies on the line. That's when, fans won't forgive players. But, yesterday there was none of that. No, there was loads of honest endeavour. It was just like a few games this season, just a lack of cohesion, a lack of keeping that ball. Palace kept the ball far better than Leicester. And as you said, a bit like the Napoli game, it was a very, very similar story. Just sloppy in possession, giving the ball away slightly too easy, which does cause you problems.
And another point that you have to add in there, obviously, you did both that game and the game on Thursday in the Europa League as well. And And that has to be remembered, really, that there has been that trip to Poland, which they did have to recover from.
Yeah, I was looking at the results on a Sunday, Dan, after a game on a Thursday night. And Leicester have got a good record. I think that was their 10th yesterday on a Sunday after a midweek game on a Thursday. 6 of which they won. You know, okay, they've lost 3, and that was the first draw yesterday against Crystal Palace. So it's something that they've coped with. It's something that they've handled. And we've spoke about the Europa League, and a lot of teams don't embrace it, don't really want to be into it because they think it's a bit of a failure having not finished in the top 5. But I don't think that's how Brendan and Leicester City see it. You know, they've embraced it, they've given it their all, and they've made no excuses going out and playing on a Sunday because, as I've just said, the results 9 times out of 10 showed that they've been positive results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jerry, when you look at the result, and I know obviously you'd been away, but you probably saw the way the scoring went, is that Leicester went 2-0 up and Palace came back and drew 2. I guess you were probably firstly disappointed that the 2-0 lead had gone, but then on reflection, when you've seen the highlights, you realise that it is a bit of a different story.
Yeah, I think, it's just the way things are going at the minute. Leicester haven't really hit the heights of the beginning of the season last year when they got off their great start. And for whatever reason, obviously injuries and, come into that. Definitely. I think, for all being honest, Johnny Evans not being fit is a massive miss. And I think, even Vestergaard, who's a vastly experienced centre-half, I think Johnny Evans just has that calmness about him. He has that experience, and he's that vocal on the pitch. And I think you can see that with some of the goals that are being conceded. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the other lads, but I think the one missing link at the minute that sort of shores everything up and gives the other players confidence when they are under pressure and their backs are against the wall, and then they come through those tough situations. That gives them, your midfielders and your forwards, that extra bit of confidence to then keep the ball and take a bit of pressure off the back players. And at the minute, it's just not happening for whatever reason, whether it's defensively or offensively. It's just not. We're just not clicking into gear at the minute. But we're still creating chances, still scoring goals. So that's the major positive. It's just at the minute we're just conceding more goals. Well, I'm not saying we're conceding more goals, but we're conceding as many goals as we're scoring, and that shows in, I think, the last 2 Premier League games, and obviously the game against Napoli.
Well, we can talk about the goals now, Tony. It's nice having 2 strikers regularly on extra time now that we can talk about goals a little bit more. Not that Jerry was
well, I can relax now for 5 minutes, can I?
We'll do the Kelechi and Nacho one first, obviously, because that came first. Jerry referenced it was very much off the training ground in a way that they pressed upfield, and that's what high pressing and high intensity play does. It can force mistakes from the opposition.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it would be fair to say that it would be something that comes naturally for Jamie Vardy. Certain forwards pressing and closing down defenders. Going back to the good old days, there was this young lad called Ian Rush who weren't too bad at doing that game. And that was back in the 1980s, and it drives me mad because everyone goes on about the high press and they're doing something different now. No, they're not. Rushy was doing it 40 years ago. But you also had a lot of lazy people like me and Gary Lineker, etc., who did want to do things like that. I think the difference is now, leading on to my point, is Jamie, it comes naturally. I would say someone like Kelechi, it doesn't come naturally. I think it's something that he's trying to add to his game, that he's working hard. I think, would you have seen Kelechi doing that maybe a year, maybe 2 years ago? Probably not. But the way the team's pressed, the way the team has pressed Leicester, and they've sort of shuffled the ball across. They played the ball a couple of times, Palace, didn't they? And listen, Tags can talk about it more than me, but defensively it does my head in because all you're doing is passing the ball sideways or square or whatever, backwards, not going anywhere. Eventually you've got to get the ball forward. But if you do dilly-dally on the ball, like they did, Palace, I think it was Anderson, wasn't it, it was a poor touch. But, I want to give Kelechi praise because it's not something I've naturally seen from him. He's obviously worked it. They've obviously worked it in training. And if you can get it into strikers' heads, that if you win the ball in that final third, you've got less to run to the goal. You know, if you're winning the ball in the halfway line or in your own half, there's a long, long way to go. If you can win the ball when it is in the defensive team's own half, it makes life a lot easier. But having said all that and giving him praise for closing down, the one thing that was absolutely certain once he got the ball, went through 1v1 on the goalkeeper, was the ball was going in the back of the net. And again, you can't stress how hard it is to make it look so easy. Because, you know, when he went through, you know, you see so many players go through, you get so frustrated. They go through there, you can see their rabbits in their headlights, they don't know what to do. Well, what's my decision? What am I going to do? And by that time, you're either tackled, goalkeeper smothers it, or you make the wrong decision. With Kelechi, you've got that class that we go through, and if you watch the slow motion, which I did this morning, and he just a little glance up, his head goes up, awareness, look, where is the goal? What am I going to do? And it's just, he made it look so easy, Dan, and that's the biggest compliment I can pay. When a ball just sees strokes, and we spoke about the great Jimmy Greaves passing, didn't we, last week? And Greaves, he made it look easy, and if you can just stroke the ball and side foot the ball past the goalkeeper, you're doing something right, and it shows you've got special talent. So let's give him praise for two things, for the closing down and then the quality of the finish.
Is it what separates a good to a great to a very good to an excellent striker, Tony? That ability to calm down in situations like that? Because I think probably anyone can maybe do an instinctive finish when you don't need to think about it. But when you throw on goal like that and you have so many options in your mind, do you chip? Do you go? Do you blast it? Do you plate it? It must be quite difficult.
There's two things that immediately spring to mind, Dan, in terms of finishing. I think the first one, and I've spoken about this before, you would have heard me a couple of weeks ago talking about it, is the first touch. Whether that's in the penalty area, whether it's a first touch finish or whether you take the touch to then do the finish. The first touch in the box is one of the most important things because that sort of defines what you're going to achieve in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net. And the second thing as well, and this is something that Kelechi has got in abundance, is that ability to just be laid back and just be calm and cool and calm and collected, really, and not rush your faults. Because, as I say, you see players going through who are not used to being in that situation, and you can see in their eyes, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do. And, you know, with him, it was just open the body, and he stroked it past the goalkeeper as if he was in training and he'd run through in a training match, and he just made it look so easy. So it is that calmness when you're in that situation. And then it's the execution, as in that first touch, get the ball in the right place. He opened his body up, he just rolled it past him. It was a fantastic finish, it really was.
Yeah, as Tony said, Ewan, there was no doubt, was there really, that Kelechi was scoring when he goes through it. And again, that's testament to how Kelechi's been in the last sort of year and a bit.
I mean, we all knew he could finish. You know, we all saw what he was capable of when he got the odd opportunity up at Man City. You know, that's why Leicester paid £25 million for him to get his services. So we all knew he could finish from a very early age. Yeah, he's had to be patient. He hasn't had too many opportunities. He was magnificent last season. 12 goals in 25 Premier League appearances, 19 in all competitions. By far his best total in his career. And once he picked Anderson's pocket and gone through one-on-one, as TC said, there was ever only going to be one outcome. And I don't think you can coach that. I think that's something that you have naturally, that calmness, that coolness in front of goal. I wasn't great in a 1v1 situation, I have to say, as TC's alluded to, rabbit in the headlight, all sorts of things going through my mind. What am I going to do? Am I going to take it round the keeper? I'm going to take it early. And if you did it and dally, as the lads have said, someone will get back and put a tackle in, and the chance is gone. I was more instinctive, something just dropping to me and hitting it. But Kelechi's cool, and you know that's why he's playing at the highest level. That's why he got all those goals last season, and it's been a frustrating time for him. At the beginning of this season, it was his birthday yesterday, as we said as well. Now he was 25 yesterday, so it was a nice little birthday present for himself. And you just get the feeling that, you know, I said yesterday that before yesterday's game, there weren't much difference in goals conceded in the first 6 games. The biggest difference was, I think, in the first 6 games of last season, Leicester had scored 14 goals compared to 7 in the beginning of this season. And that's why it's been a bit of a sticky start. If you can get Kelechi and somehow fit those two up front, Vardy and Kelechi, then they will find the goals that will get Leicester back up towards that top 4.
Yeah, it's the goals he scored since it was around about February time, really, Jerry, wasn't it? That Kelechi Iheanacho came into the team the back end of last season and just went ballistic, didn't he? Just kept scoring. It seems like since February we've been talking about him almost every week.
Yeah, and he finished highest goal scorer last year, which whereas Jamie's been the highest goal scorer for as long as we're going to all remember, basically, and then for Kelechi to go and finish highest goal scorer, it was a great achievement. And I don't want to say the pennies finally dropped with Kelechi, but he's a different player, and maybe he's just become a bit more mature in himself. He's obviously gained a lot of confidence from scoring goals. I think what works well between them two when they play alongside each other, and Tony's probably a better person to ask, is there's balance between the pair of them because one's left-footed, one's right-footed mainly. And so they give each other that balance to play off each other, as well as all the interplay and understanding the runs that they make. I think sometimes managers are always looking for that balance in a team, and especially up front with a left-footed striker and a right-footed striker. And I think that adds to that partnership. So he looks a lot more confident when he's on a pitch. He understands the role that he's in the team to play a lot more better. We've seen that perfectly yesterday, because that was probably one of the issues that he had before he was getting in the team regular, was his defensive work, his closing down when he didn't have the ball at his feet. But yesterday's goal was a trademark Brendan Rodgers centre forward set up without the ball, and he got his rewards for that. So every time he scores a goal that's not involving 10, 15 passes, him making a little slide run down the side of the defence and then slotting it in, that will give him more and more confidence, and it also gives him belief in what the manager's doing, and all the players more belief in what the manager's doing. So it's a big tick in the box for Kelechi.
Yeah, well, what do you think about the partnership, both for you and Tony? But Tony first, the partnership between Jamie Vardy and Kelechi Iheanacho, just as Jerry says, seems to work very well together. It's got the balance, as he said, of the left footer and the right footer.
Yeah, I think it's always a bonus if you can get a left foot and a right footer down. It's not essential. I'm personally, when I played up front, I actually like playing on the left-hand side. And people say, well, you're not left-footed. I said, well, no, but when I'm moving the ball inside, I'm coming onto my right foot. Whereas if you're on the right-hand side, you're moving the ball inside, you're going to hit the shot with your left foot. So there was a method behind my madness. But I think both of them, they've got great movement, they've got great awareness and understanding of each other's game, and they can play left and right and left. They can swap over and they can do that. I think the one thing it says to me, and I'm not manager of Leicester City Football Club, but the one thing it says to me is that Leicester are going to be a much more dangerous team with those two up front than if you only play one up front. I've always been a fan of two up front. I don't think I know football goes through phases and cycles, and it's great and trendy to play one up front and all that. I understand that, but there is always room for two up front. And basically, you can put two players up front, and you can pick whatever system you want behind them. You can have a back three, you can have a back four, you can have four in midfield, five in midfield, you can do three in midfield, you can do 4-3-1-2. There's so many different formations, but by having those two players, I think firstly it puts the opposition on the back foot, because if they're playing a back four, the back four have really got to look to manage the front two. If there's only one up front, it's down two centre halves, wing back, full-backs push in. It gives them the advantage from an attacking point of view. So, I think it's something that Brendan's probably wanted to do. I don't know why. Only Brendan knows why he didn't start with Kelechi at the start of the season. But going forward, I think it's something that I want to see as an ex-forward. I don't know about you, but it's something I want to see. I want to see Leicester play two up front. And then as all the injured players come back, you can pick your best players behind them. But it will give them more options going forward.
Yeah, the thing is with Kelechi as well, and we referenced on the show, didn't we, that he can drop in, he can drop behind Jamie Vardy if he has to as well.
And they have. They've got different strengths. Jamie's better with the ball in front of him. He's got that electric pace. He loves playing on defenders' shoulders. Kelechi has got that other string to his bow, if you like, of he can drop slightly deeper. You know, he is comfortable with his back to goal. He is comfortable at receiving the ball to his feet and getting on the half turn and then maybe sliding the ball into Jamie Vardy. I mean, there was one instance in that second half where he has dropped deeper and someone's played a good ball up to him, great awareness, great first touch, he's turned and he's pinged the ball out to Harvey Barnes on the left-hand side. He can do that. And it's not just about having those two up front. You know, you've got to mix things up. One's got to come slightly deeper. One's got to make those forward runs, as Jamie, 9 times out of 10 will do. And they've shown, Dan, that when they play together, they score goals. And as Tony's alluded to there, somehow Brendan has to find a system because they're a massive goal threat.
Yeah, one of the stats, Jerry, actually, that we read out on Matchday Live after the game yesterday was that in the games that they've started up front together in the Premier League, which is 32, between them, they've scored 33 goals.
There you go. No, you don't need to add any more than that. And that's that's the only thing you really need to look at. Tony's just mentioned it. They're set. Managers go through cycles, and we all know that probably Brendan's most favourite position formation at the minute is that 4-2-3-1. When he first came in, he was playing a 4-3-3 with the 2 number 8s in Madison and Tielemans. He's changed to 3 centre halves with a 2 up front and found that was very successful. And now, you see yesterday he's playing a 4-4-2, but again, it's about round pegs, round holes, and playing your strongest 11 in any given game. And it may not be your preferred formation, but if you've got your 11 best players on the pitch and playing them where they need to play, because that's where you're going to get the best out of them, then you've a better chance of winning a game. And that stat speaks for itself. That's not a fluke. That's not a one-off. That shows that over that course of 32 games, those two produce the goods. And Tony's right. There is a place for playing 2 up front. Burnley have been playing 2 up front ever since they got in the Premier League. And they're very, very successful at it. And I know they play a slightly different style of football to Leicester, but you can manage any formation as long as you are playing your best players in their best positions. And I think that's another main thing for me is you have to put round pegs and round holes.
Speaking of best players and best formations, Tony, I think no matter what formation you play, Jamie Vardy will play for Leicester City, given the form particularly that he's in as well at the start of this season. And that goal was so good. The finish was so good from Jamie Vardy.
Well, I'm going to say exactly the same thing that I said about Kelechi's finish. It was another stunning finish from Jamie, making it look so easy. And again, credit to the boys, that pressure on the halfway line, they win the ball, Harvey gets it. And when you get running like that with the ball, which he's so good at, it's really just about picking the right option. Yeah, Kelechi on the right, you've got Jamie on the left, you've got to make that decision. And also you've got to give the good pass as well. His pass was almost inch perfect, wasn't it, Harvey? The defender just stretched his leg out. It's just gone past the defender. And to be fair to Jamie, he's just got to check a little bit to get the ball in that right position. But once he gets the ball where he wants it, again, he makes it look so simple. And it's that getting that first touch, as I keep going on about, getting the ball in front of you, it makes life so much easier. But then you've still got that calmness that you've got to have that I described with Kelechi's goal. We always talk about going across the goalkeeper, but you don't always have to do that. You've got to assess that situation. You've got to make an instant decision. If you take another touch, you're either going to get closed down by the keeper or the defender will wipe you out. But not with Jamie. Again, he just stroked the ball into net, made it look really, really easy. What's he got? 6 Premier League goals so far in 7 games. It's an outstanding return. I think if you're looking to be a top goal scorer, if you're playing 38 league games, you're looking for a return of 1 in every 2 games. In other words, you're going to get 19, 20 league goals. I think if you get to the end of the season and you've got that in the Premier League, having played 38 games, you've had a hell of a season. The way Jamie's going, he's got 6 in 7. And, you know, listen, there's injuries, all sorts of things that come into a season and tiredness, etc. But in Jamie Vardy, Leicester have got a player who's in dynamic form. He's always been a top goal scorer. And again, his goal, he made it look so easy yesterday.
It looked for all the world like he was going to go across the goalkeeper. He opened his body up, didn't he? Even looked that way, and then he just knocked it into the near post.
Yeah, he did. And, you know, that's what I'm talking about with making that decision, Dan. And, you know, as a youngster, you're always taught to go across the goalkeeper. But where Jamie's on the left-hand side of the field, he's got that option with his right foot, because as long as you open your body up, which he did, you've got the ability to curl it past the keeper. Sometimes you can go through the keeper. If the keeper's standing there with his legs wide open, put it through his legs. Or you can whip it to the near post. It gives you so many options. But the key to everything for Jamie was getting the ball in the right position, which he did fantastically well.
Yeah, absolutely. We were very impressed with you. And in particular, I know that you'll probably say it now, you were about the 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
You're doing a Thierry Henry, opening your body up and put it in that far corner.
I think because, and we spoke about it yesterday, and because you've got more margin for error, you've got more of the goal to hit, and the goalkeeper in that position, he naturally closes that angle down. He wants you to go to his left, which gives him more of an opportunity. He didn't have a lot of goal to hit, to be fair, but he knew what he wanted to do. That's the thing. You know, there was no hesitation. He knew where he wanted to put it. At that couple of touches to get out of his feet, and it was a magnificent finish. You know, to me personally, I would always go to the goalkeeper's left, because I say you've got more of the goal to hit. I look at Jamie Vardy's goals and his performances in the opening 7 games. He looks as good now as what he ever has done, I think, for Leicester. He's still got that desire. He's still got that pace. The goals that he scored have been absolutely magnificent. You know what? And I was talking about it yesterday. And last season he got 7 goals in his first 8 games, but 5 of those came from the penalty spot. So I mean, he hasn't had a penalty yet, and he's already. I mean, before Mo Salah's magnificent goal for Liverpool last night, he was top scorer of the Premier League, and I was telling you that goal yesterday. I think he's now 17th in the all-time Premier League goal-scoring chart. He needs 4 more to go above Nicholas Anelka, Robbie Keane and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. And I think he needs 16 to go above Michael Owen, who is in 10th. That is well achievable. That is well achievable for Jamie Vardy.
Yeah, it's just been incredible. One final word on him, Jerry, before we look at the Crystal Palace goals is every single one of Jamie Vardy's 6 goals in the league so far this season seem a bit different, don't they? As Ewan said, none of them penalties. They've all been really good finishes in one instance or the other.
Well, it's quite simple. Danny knows what he's doing in the box, doesn't he? And I think whatever situation he finds himself in, and again, the 2 lads probably better than me, but I think over the years, and we spoke about Jimmy's longevity, and the longer you play up there, the more years you spend at the top league, it's almost like it becomes easier because your brain takes over your decision making. You're not a rabbit in the headlights. You don't sort of have a mental block in front of the goal. You know exactly what's going to happen before the ball comes there. You know exactly which run you're going to make when the ball's in a wide position, because he's been in that situation so many times before. And as Ewan rightly says, he looks as good as ever. And it's his brain that's taken over. And everything else just clicks into place. As long as you can keep Jamie Vardy fit, and keep him running around inside that box, then he will score goals, because he's been in all those situations so many times over his career. And he'll probably miss 1 or 2. Do you know what I mean? So it goes, right, I know what I'm doing next time. Next time that happens, it's in the back line net. And invariably, that's what you're saying with Jamie now. Converting those half chances, or converting a cross or a pass from out wide and thinking, where's he come from? Because his football brain takes over, his football intelligence. And that's why you're saying the return. Well, it's not the reason why you're saying the return that he's given right now, but it's a part of it, a good part of it, that his longevity and his football brain just click into gear in certain situations, and his technique. Everything else does the rest.
Yeah, that's the positive part of the game yesterday. The negative part, obviously, in that second half, Jerry, the 2 goals for Crystal Palace. What did you make of them? Let's talk about the first one, obviously, in particular. And
yeah,
go on.
I can be hypercritical of the defender for the first one from Elliott. As the ball comes across and he takes a pot shot first time, doesn't really connect with it. But can't remember if it was Vestergaard or who it was who went out and challenged him. But what they did, they turned their back on the ball, and as it hits him, they're half turned, half facing their own goal. And when the ball bounces to Elliott again, there's that small window of opportunity. If you take one straight on the chest and don't turn your back, and that ball pops up in the air, then that ball becomes a 50-50. So I'm being hypercritical here, but that's the difference between, at least getting that second chance to volley it into the back of the net, or it becoming a 50-50 ball. And just by putting pressure on him, it then becomes a more high tariff finish for Elliott. But it's a free shot after a rebound. And I just think if the defender there takes one
Bertrand,
in the chest or in the face. Sorry?
It was Bertrand, I think it was.
Bertrand, was it? Yeah, Bertrand. I think if he takes one in the chest or in the face, there's a better chance that goal doesn't happen. And I am being hypercritical, but sometimes you've got to take one for the team, wherever that is on your body. So that's the only issue I have. We can talk about the lead up to the goal, the ball coming in from the left-hand side. But I think by that stage, Palace were well in the game. They're taking control of the game. And so it's all right being critical about what happens out wide. You've got to give Palace credit for that, because they had upped the ante somewhat. They were playing the pressure on Leicester in that second half. And we all know when in those situations as defenders, when your backs are against the wall, you have to be right on point. And it's them little fine margins that we always talk about. And that was the fine margin for me, was take it straight in the face or take it straight in the chest, and then that ball becomes a fight ball. You've got a chance of clearing it second time round.
Yeah, the second one was probably even more frustrating in that sense, Tony. There were chances to clear the ball, weren't there, before it was eventually headed in by Schlupp.
Yeah, I'm just sort of thinking, Dan, I think if you've got, coming back to the defensive injuries, if you've got your main men in the middle, your Johnny Evans, your Fofanas, your Soyunchus, and I think in a way you would almost encourage them to cross the ball, because you know that you've got your big boys in there who are going to head it clear and get rid of the ball. But of course, if you haven't got those defensive players in them, and Didi missing as well, of course, if you haven't got those defensive players, then I think you have to work harder to stop the cross. That would be my criticism. Is like, just work harder. Don't let them cross the ball, because as soon as that ball comes into the box, we saw it with the first goal, and then we saw it with the second goal. Yes, of course, they're good crosses, and it was difficult to defend. But, you're just thinking there was just mistakes made. The ball eventually loops up in the air. I think it was Castagna. He's on the byline. And again, a schoolboy rule is if you're unsure as a defender, and I was hopeless as a defender, but I know if I'm standing on the byline and I don't know what I'm doing, sometimes you do not get a call. It's just part of football. So a lot of the time, people say, hit it away, clear it, volley it, whatever. You get an instruction. If you don't get an instruction, you have to make that split-second decision that I'm talking about as a forward. You have to make it as a defender. And the one thing you don't do is head the ball back into play. You just flip back header, put it out for a corner, and everyone will say, why didn't you clear it? And you say, tell me and I'll clear it. But he just got caught in two minds, Castagna. He didn't deal with it, and then the ball was played back in. I think it came off Vestergaard as well. Perhaps Vestergaard could have cleared it as well. It was just a sort of almost like a catalogue of errors. And as so often happens, you get a player playing against his old club who scores against Leicester, in Jeff Schlupp. But the first goal was a poor goal. Tags has explained it very well why it was so poor. But the second goal for me as well, there were so many times they could have cleared the ball. And, it just made for painful watching, really, and a poor goal to concede.
Yeah, so it finished 2-2 then at Selhurst Park, which leaves Leicester on 8 points after their 7 games at the start of the season. Ewan, how would you sum up the start to the season so far for the Foxes?
Slow, disappointing. You look back at that, the West Ham performance at the London Stadium. I mean, that's the worst that I've seen Leicester play for a very long time. I think they've been unlucky in games, Dan. I look at that Man City game at the King Power, and on another day, with a little bit of luck, they come away from that game with at least a point. The Brighton game, which we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, I thought decision went against them. So on another occasion, they could have got something from that point, from that game. Away from home, slightly disappointing. 1 win in 4, and that came against the bottom team, Norwich, and I think that's the big difference at the start of this season compared to last season. I mean, last season Leicester were unplayable away from home. I think they won 6 of their first 7 away games. They've already lost 2 away from home to West Ham and Man City. 2 tough places to go. I make no bones about that. They're not easy to sorry, it's not Man City. Brighton, I'm talking. They've lost 2. Yeah, Brighton. Sorry. Last season away from home, Leicester only lost 3 games. Away from home, their form was unbelievable last season. Defensively, as the lads have spoken about, not great. I think they've got the worst defensive record in the top 15, so that has to get better. The 2 goals yesterday, if I can go, they were scruffy goals. It's not as if Leicester were open wide. They were scruffy goals. They were avoidable goals. But all in all, looking back at the start of the season, disappointing, Dan, if I can use that word.
Yeah, but you expect, Jerry, that Leicester will obviously turn it around because they've got the quality in the squad. They've got a quality manager. It will come good. It's just not gone their way yet. Yeah,
it's all about time. Simple as that. And I've no doubt they'll come back. They've got too many good players. It's as simple as that. It's just about being patient, finding. Again, you listen to Brendan's post-match interview. It's about finding the balance of the team, he'll admit himself that he's still trying to search for that, that magic formula, considering the amount of players that are out injured. And of those players that are out injured defensively, how many would start on any given week? And you'd have to say there's 2 or 3 in there. Definitely Johnny Evans, for me, comes straight back in and plays alongside whoever. He's number 1. I think that's clear. Well, it's clear for me to see. And I say that's not trying to take anything away from anybody else. But I think, again, when you talk about Jamie Vardy, you talk about Johnny Evans in the same vein, but only in a defensive way. His experience, the trials and tribulations, triumphants he's been through in his career, set him apart from the other players in that defence, just like it does with Jamie Vardy up front, sets him apart. And that is probably the one main aspect of that defensive backline that's missing at the minute for me. But there's other players, Fofana, James Justin, 2 or 3 others that when they're fit, they apply pressure on the other defenders to make sure that they're doing their job right. And so that all becomes a little melting pot of its own, that backline. And so invariably, when you've got players fighting for competition for places, then the standard automatically rises. Brendan Rodgers doesn't have to do too much then, whereas now he's fighting with himself, Brendan, and his staff to try and find that formula because there is a lack of bodies in that defensive area.
Yeah, final point then on Leicester, Tony, and it not one to make excuses, but you look back in the last few seasons, the start of this one as well, you can go as far back as Project Restart when Leicester came back and they had players out and they had injury problems. Towards the end of last season, of course, they had a lot of injury problems. And then now at the start of this one, they have as well. And it is a shame because if the core group could stay together, they would and they hopefully still will achieve an awful lot.
Yeah, I think the point is, Dan, is to emphasise is not to panic. Of course, it's been a slightly disappointing start to the season. If you look at Leicester in 13th position, are Leicester fans happy with that? No. Are the players and management? No, of course they're not. But you've got to put it in perspective and you've got to look at those injuries. You can't dissect the first 7 games without mentioning the injuries, because it makes a massive difference. We look at the top 4, you've got the predicted top 4, they're all in those top 4 positions. But even at a club like Man City or Chelsea or whatever, if you've got 3 of their outstanding defenders missing, even with the vast riches that those clubs have got, they're still going to struggle, and it would be harder. All right, maybe they won't be in first position; they'll be in 4th position, as an example. But it's still all in relation. Or even the big clubs would struggle. Look at Liverpool, rocked away with the league, lose Van Dijk, lose Gomez. They was a completely different team last year. So even the big clubs can't deal with the major injuries. And if you've got Evans, Fofana, Ricardo, Justin, all these top players, and Didi didn't play at all players that contribute and help to Leicester to become the good defensive outfit they have been over the last couple of years. It's all right having the Kelechi's and Jamies and that we're eulogising about, but if you haven't got those defensive players, it makes it very, very difficult. But my advice to all the Leicester fans, don't panic. Let's wait for the injured players to get back. Every time a week, we've got a 2-week break now with the international break. It gives the players a little bit more time to get back. And then once you get to Christmas time and then you've got all your defensive players back, then hopefully we'll see Leicester slowly climb that table. And the ultimate aim, as we know, Dan, is to get into Europe. And you can get into Europe many, many ways. They're still in the Europa League. You've got the league position. So there's many ways to get into Europe. So, it's just a little bit of patience, and let's wait for those players to come back, because it does make a big difference.
It sounded to me, Jerry, like Tony was saying, that defenders are more important than strikers.
At times, Dan.
Well, there's an old saying, isn't there? An old football cliche that forwards win you games, defenders win you championships. But I don't know how true that is, and I didn't make that up. But I'm just chucking it out there one more time.
Well, you're out and got this goal, that's for sure. Anyway, right, we always get you to pick one game at the weekend that caught your eye. You and I think I know what your answer will be.
What, the
Premier League? Probably
I'm going to go. I'm going to go for one that obviously I live in Norwich, played there for 7 years. They got their first point in 17 Premier League games on Saturday up at Burnley in a boring 0-0 draw. But that's what they needed, because they were getting so close to breaking Sunderland's 20 consecutive defeats in the Premier League. So yeah, they've got their first point in 7 games. Hopefully they can kick on now.
You see, I thought you were going to go for the one that followed the Leicester game yesterday, actually, but no, that's a good one. Jerry, you might go for that. You're nodding along.
Well, there was a few good games, weren't there? I think, the Man United Everton game I thought was an excellent game, even though there was only 2 goals. But I thought Everton were excellent on the day. I thought there's another team who, have a really good chance of doing, some really good things this season, along with the likes of West Ham. You mentioned Brighton. Brighton this season are an improved team. But yeah, you couldn't take your eyes off that game, could you? Liverpool, Man City game. I think it was excellent. Everyone goes on about Salah's goal, of course, was absolutely out of this world. But again, that's the 2 I thought Phil Foden's finish was right up there as well. I mean, that's the only place in the goal league can put that ball.
Yeah.
To get a past Alisson. I mean, it's a fantastic finish, absolutely fantastic finish for me. But it was just a great game. It was one of those games that you get every so often in the Premier League, and you wonder why the Premier League is so global. And that game yesterday epitomises what the Premier League is all about. Just end to end, both teams going for the win. One team hits that knockout blow with a goal. The other team comes back. Then they go back and forward. Then it takes a world-class goal, to get back in front. And then, Man City come back again and score another fantastic goal as well. De Bruyne with that equaliser. It was just a great game.
Yeah, you can't talk about that game without mentioning the block as well at the end, Tony, from Rodri, when you look for all the world like Fabinho was going to get a late winner there.
I wish I'd have seen it, Dan. I haven't had time to see it. You know, that's what happens when you go to West Ham and you have a few beers after the game. You don't watch Liverpool City. But, yeah, I mean, listen, it was obviously a fantastic game. I listened to bits of it on the radio on the way home, so I haven't seen it yet. But, I mean, there's a couple of games I'd like to mention. Tag's already touched on it. I really enjoyed the Man United-Everton game, particularly being an ex-Everton player. And Everton without their front two as well. We're talking about defenders. They've got Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin missing as well. So to go to Old Trafford, that was a fantastic point. But the key game of the weekend, Dan, you've probably got to say, was Leeds-Watford. From the point of view, Leeds got their first victory, which is a massive result for them. And as a result of that, Watford have lost their manager. So that was, in terms of the Premier League, that was probably the key game. And guess who's going to get the Watford job? We all know his name, Mr. Claudio Ranieri.
Absolutely. Well, when you go back and watch those highlights, Tony, you'll see the block and you'll know exactly what.
I'll talk about it next time. Yeah, we'll do.
Exactly, in a couple of weeks. Right, okay, it is time to end the show then, and we can do that with our football Jenga. Now, it didn't go too well last week, did it, Tony? It didn't go on that far.
Oh, I'm nervous.
Hopefully it will go a little bit further this week. So as Jamie Vardy scored his 124th Premier League goal yesterday, it put him 17th in the Premier League goals chart. Now, as a result, I want you to name the players in the top 30, which is coincidentally all of those players that have got 100 goals in the Premier League. Now, I hope you were listening to Ewan earlier, because he did mention a few of these names, which would make me smile. So he can start us off then, Ewan, please. So a quick reminder then, the top 30 Premier League all-time goal scorers.
I'm going to go Alan Shearer.
Jerry, you're up next, please.
Thierry Henry.
And Tony.
Robbie Keane.
Wayne Rooney.
Robbie Fowler.
Matt Letizia.
Oh. Frank Lampard.
Jimmy Floyd, Hasselbank.
Oh, he's nicked it.
Have we said Michael Owen already? No, Michael Owen.
Yeah.
Les Ferdinand.
Ian Wright.
Yeah, right.
Sergio Aguero.
Robbie Keane.
Robbie Keane.
Have you really?
I said it right at the start, Ewan. Yeah.
Ewan, you keep doing
Can't believe I'm not right.
I'm not writing them down, am I?
You
No,
keep
no, mate.
doing this to yourself. Every time Ewan goes out, it's because he repeats them.
Jesus.
Right, well, it's between Jerry and Tony then.
Harry Kane.
Oh, good one, Tags. Produce that, didn't you? Didier Drogba.
Ruud van Nistelrooy.
Go that one, Tags. I
No,
don't know where we got 100 goals. I'm going to go Stevie G.
no,
Ooh,
Ruud van
shout.
Nistelrooy, sorry, is not. Steven Gerrard did, so you've won it there, Tony. But Ruud van
Ooh,
Nistelrooy,
Tags.
Sorry?
yeah, Ruud van Nistelrooy didn't get 100.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
And Steven
Boom!
Gerrard did.
TC.
Boom.
So, yeah.
Dan, I've got 78, by the way, but the other 140 don't count in the old division.
I know, I knew
That's
as soon as I was
a
doing it, Tony. As soon as I was doing it, I was thinking, Tony's 100% going to say something here. So.
Oh, sorry, I had to get that in. But at least I improved from last week's performance. Like, Tags, last week, Dan done all this research for me and Elliott, and I asked him about 2 questions. It finished. So I've redeemed myself, Dan, haven't I?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a good one. That I'll read out some of the names that you missed between you.
Dennis Bergkamp.
No.
No.
So Andy Cole, Darren Bent, Dion Dublin, Dwight York, Emile Heskey, Jamie Vardy, you could have said, Jermaine Defoe, Mo Salah, Nicholas Anelka, Paul Scholes, Peter Crouch, Robin van Persie, Romelu Lukaku, Ryan Giggs, Steven Gerrard, as Tony said, and Teddy Sheringham.
Oh,
So You hear him,
Teddy Sheringham. But I was leaving him right till the end because I thought he wasn't going to get that.
Yeah, no, it was good there.
Had Andy Cole as
Andy
well,
Cole.
but I thought, Rui Van Nistelrooy, he's got to have scored 100 goals in the Premier League.
No, we can all go and research how many he got, but yeah, not quite 100. So there we go. Well done, Tony. Anyway, you redeemed yourself, as you said, from last week. Thanks to Iwan Roberts, Tony Cottee and Jerry Taggart, of course. There'll be no extra time next week, obviously, with it being the international break, but we'll all be back for that Manchester United game after the international break, so do join us for that on Matchday Live. But see you later, guys.
Cheers, boys.
Everybody.